Hello and welcome. We return once more for World Building Wednesday, where, of course, we will build worlds. And, well, that's what we're going to do today. Build worlds. Just as soon as we double check that everything here is working. It has been a while, and so it's always good to double check such things. And it appears that things are working, so let's get right to it. I should start, I suppose, by apologizing for the absence. I have been away for a while, mostly due to the fact that I was in transit in a starship, of course. And unfortunately, I think I might have brought it up last time, but our heating system in board more so our radiation, not radiation as in radiation, but heat radiation, getting heat to dissipate and so forth, our systems, well, broke and they were being fixed, and unfortunately, well, it took a while, but we return. And so, without further ado, let's get to world building. Let's see here. Should probably find a map that actually, here we are. Of course, we were last time on Solo Sunday, which is now Friday, but confusion and all that. Running a scenario in which our character, Juliana Aldous, was making her way through the city and out of this gang's territory and back into the territory in which everything takes place in. I must admit, I am conflicted. Specifically, for our world building, of course, I have stated before that I wish to get more in depth into the world building because often we'll go off topic or ramble or talk about the lore or work on maps for the solo game. But I kind of want to dig into the actual world building. I suppose lore's covered by that and so forth, but I just kind of want to dig into the process of it. And so, basically, I'm conflicted here between working on, I mean, it's all good, don't get me wrong. I suppose I should state the words as opposed to ramble without stating the words. That's just, So, basically, we can world build here. By here, I mean the city Juliana Aldous is in, and the planet and all of its relations and so forth. We have some idea of the area around it and the like, as it is in relatively established territories, game-wise and location-wise and background lore-wise. There's, however, space is big, and this particular star system and area is not, I mean, while it exists lore-wise, what exists lore-wise is the area, if you will. The Terran nations exist, but obviously, given the fact that they have a sector, multiple I believe, I haven't gone in and basically written the lore for every single one of their worlds, of every single one of their systems in an entire sector at least, but multiple sectors, given that they have multiple sectors, because a sector is 500 to 1,500 or so star systems, which we've probably been over before. But the point is, obviously, even though we've been at this for a long time, and by we, I mean, of course, Galactic Requiem Industries, Of course, we have not written the exact detailed who's the leader, who's the specific corporations, what's the exact government type of every single world in this, every single star system, of course. But we do, of course, have an overarching law. So, we have a lot, but we don't have everything. So we are bound by certain constraints when working with this faction and working in this territory. But anything we do, world building wise, in this territory is loosely bound by those constraints. That's not too big of a problem. The problem we face with that is this place is not. The useful thing is it ties into Juliana Aldis's adventures and so forth. And it's nice to work on lore anywhere, of course. But currently, in the state of Galactic Requiem, being the state of the galaxy and the way things are going, civilized space, and specifically, I mean, even if we say civilized space, even just the Terran nations, which are technically a part of civilized space, the Terran nations are less important than civilized space as a whole, and civilized space is currently less important than the frontier. So, while working on civilized space is not necessarily a bad thing, any world building is good, working on civilized space is more important for our solo campaign currently, unless something happens to our adventurer, Yulana Aldis. However, the frontier is more relevant currently to Galactic Requiem as a whole. I mean, everywhere is always important. There's a war going on in civilized space and the like. But basically, basically, the frontier is where a lot of things, campaign wise, for a bunch of different campaigns, are happening. Of course, there's always things happening in civilized space, but there's just recently been a heavy lean on the importance of the frontier. So, of course, I kind of want to work on the frontier, but also for our thing, we're here in the Terran nations. So that's basically the problem of where to world build. Of course, there are broader topics to world build, and we could talk about the lore and so forth, but when world building, it's just trying to decide which section to work on, because most of the, overarching world building aspects are already done. As I've said before, we've been at this for basically ever. Galactic Requiem is not new in any way, shape, or form. And basically, as I think I've said before, all the lore, not obviously all the lore, but all the big things, and a lot of small stuff is already out there. The universe is lived in. So, the thing is, like, I suppose now I'm just rambling, to be fair, if you've seen anything I do, going off topic and rambling is the name of the game, which is what we're trying to not do. But as you can see, that's not really working. We're rambling about what to work on. So, I suppose we'll try and get down to focus. We'll start with a little bit of lore talk and we'll see if we can't get into the actual world building. Is this the right one? It is very good. So here is what we call civilized space. It is literally just this band here. Technically, unfortunately, due to the way I generated this map, I say generated, I copied this map over from a previous iteration of this map, basically. Back in the day, oh no, we're going off topic. Back in the day, I had this map, this basically, the blue circle being the galaxy, literally this size, but to scale. And by to scale, I mean one square, as you can see, not these, but like these squares. Every square being a singular light year. Unfortunately, that made the map too large, unwieldy, having memory issues, at least with my old computer, and so forth. But in simple terms, basically, we zoomed in and basically made every square a sector of 150 light years instead of 1 light year. So this map is the former borders of the other map and its territories and so forth, mapped out in sectors. So you don't actually see the star systems. What we do then is separate maps, as I've shown, like this, as a sector map for each individual square of the of this map. Every one of those goes to a sector map. So you don't actually see the stars here, but in the original map, it was to scale 1 light year, and every, not every square, but, you know, every distance there were stars and so forth. But basically the borders were transferred over. But due to the way and scaling and the way it was transferred over, we transferred it in blocks, specifically in this block you might be able to see here. Let me make a mark here. Basically, this square from here to here, basically being the block that it is. But the map does, as you can see here, go slightly off and over, and some things are not displayed because of just the scaling that we put it in. For instance, there's stuff over here. There's stuff all along this side. And there's an entire section down here. And there's a little bit over here that encompasses the majority of what is considered the explored territories, if you will. What we always refer to as civilized space, however, is just, if I can bring up my pointer, this section with, which technically goes down to the nations of the Terran breakaway, which go over here, and ends basically, kind of, it can be debated whether it includes the war zone or not, and basically just covers this neutral territories all the way up through here. It cuts out at Eldritch space, somewhat hits these neutral territories and goes back around the council space. It doesn't reach out here, but basically this is what is considered civilized space in this direct area. Technically, the Empire is also loosely considered a part of civilized space. Up here is considered the northern nations, which technically also goes over here a ways, but that's the northern nations. The Empire separates them. There's here, there's not really, then there's the frontier. The frontier, well, there's southern frontier, of course, northern frontier, deep southern frontier, deep northern frontier, eastern frontier, and western frontier. But we don't really have much going on that's talked about in the eastern and western frontier opposites. Anyway, most things that happen in the border region, or the northern border region, something's happening in eldritch and chaotic space. And this is Imperial territory, so there's not really a way for most people to get there that aren't Imperial without going the long way. I think we've discussed before the way FTL works, which we're also having a lore video we're working on to cover. But in simple terms, FTL is done via routes, as you can see by these blue connections. FTL is done via routes. You can FTL between two non-routed points. You don't have to go this way, but it is extremely dangerous and likely that you will die terribly. So, people will use FTL routes to travel because that's the way it's done. However, generating FTL routes, they can be made. They can be natural, but they're usually not natural. 99.999% of the time, they are made by sentient species. Usually. There are exceptions, but FTL routes are usually made by sentient species using technologies and so forth. Like I said, you can travel between points that aren't, and you don't have to go on the line, but you generally don't because it's dangerous. But in simple terms, what that basically means is it costs a lot to generate a route, and it costs a lot to generate a route. It takes time and money. And so basically, and it's, well, in order to map the route, you need to run the route, which is dangerous. But basically, it boils down to there are ancient routes from long ago and all that, but there's not a lot of known connections far off from the borders of civilized space. I remind you that every one of these squares, not the greater yellow squares, but the small white outline squares, is a sector of 150 by 150 light years. Each one with connections that don't go in straight lines necessarily and connect all the way across them through. So finding direct connections further and further out that still exist in an area that's relatively sparsely populated is not easy. So there's not heavy exploration deeper and deeper. The further you get, the less exploration there is into routes and so forth and mapping and all that. There are pockets of civilization out there, but there's a lot of area that's not there, basically, route-wise for transit. Down here, you see little icons. That's because this is where the Sacred Grove sector is. It's where one of our campaigns took place before. Unfortunately, it's not archived here, but it's where one of our campaigns took place, and it is this map specifically. This sector is that one marked with an I. We had a campaign that took place here, but basically this is the frontier sector, well, the access to the frontier from call space, because there's a gate. But basically, it means that this is an easy place for civilization to get to, theoretically. And this is where, well, it's called, due to, in civilized space, it's called the heart of the frontier, or the heart of the southern frontier, etc., or the capital of the frontier. They call it a lot of things, but it's basically called that in civilized space because it's the only place far away that has an easy route to get to from civilized space. Of course, it's not invaded or anything, well, other than... I don't think that's archived either. This territory can't really be invaded by civilized space because the gate is in a Dyson swarm. If you know what a Dyson swarm is, you know that population-wise and resource-wise, especially because it has star lifting, and if you know what Dyson Swarm and star lifting is, you know that any sort of invasion to try and secure the system and gate is just not going to work out. The numbers of population and resource output of even a non-unified, I mean governmentally unified specifically, Dyson swarm has so much output that conquest is it would take an effort. Even in the height of the systems authority's reign. Where is it? Here we are. Nope, wrong one. This is where we want it to be. So in the Second Galactic War, the war that's going on, the Red Forces being systems authority, these being I forget their alliance, but basically former council. Even during that, the systems authority at one point had everything basically. They were able to basically the council shattered into its constituent nations. It's not a nation in itself, it's an alliance of other nations. It basically shattered. We'd have to get into the history of the Second Galactic War to cover all of that. But in simple terms, it shattered, and basically only the capital sectors were left over, still unified under the council government. The capital sectors, I don't believe this is an accurate map, but basically the capital sectors have several Dyson swarms in them and are exceptionally advanced. The Dyson swarms literally held out several sectors worth of output to hold back the system's authority, which itself had so many more planets than them, and some partial Dyson swarms and some Dyson swarms, but nowhere near the same amount as the council core. And basically, despite loosely controlling, they were basically constantly suffering rebellions and uprisings and conflicts with the smaller nations and so forth. So it wasn't by any means a solidified thing, but still surrounded basically with no support from any other of the former nations that made up the council. They were able to hold off the entirety of the system's authority for the most part, with just their handful of Dyson swarms in the core capital. As such, like, that's the output of a Dyson swarm. The Second Galactic War is still going on, so none of the core nations really have the output or resources to spare, even if they wanted to try and invade the deep frontier versing a Dyson swarm where they can't even surround it. They'd be jumping in a secured jump point into a Dyson swarm worth of things. It's not like they could surround it. They would literally just be jumping into a secured point. As such, like, even if they wanted to invade, they can't really. I say that, but I say that, but admittedly, like I said, I don't think it's archived, but I, personally, Lord Basilius of the Empire, invaded that Dyson swarm. It didn't work out. We still have forces there. We captured a few stations, but we in no way have made any progress. I mean, admittedly, our tacticians, they messed up real bad, and apparently didn't know that it was a Dyson swarm. And we'd already committed a fleet to the assault, and we secured a few stations, and, as the Empire, I mean, as a single Imperial Lord with, like, three star systems worth of output, non-Dyson Swarm star systems, mind you, worth of output, our Imperial technology could not save the day. The Empire, of course, I think I've covered this before. We are the most advanced nation in the galaxy. If you were to have well, we'd have to explain how it all works, but tech level wise, being rough simplicity of access to certain technologies, the galaxy has tech level 16 to 18, pushing well, galactic civilized space more so, has tech level 16 to 18, which means things. It's hard to explain. While we, the Empire, have tech level 20 to 22. Technically, we have the highest tech level, which is like 26, but that's reserved for royalty and core forces, core being the imperial core government. As a lord, I have access to, at best, tech level 24. If I push my technology, well, as you can see, there's a bit of a difference between all those numbers. I suppose since we've brought it up, sorry, it's scrolling through my files here. Since we brought it up, we might as well cover it. But basically, even with 3 planets, not planets, I keep saying planets, 3 star systems, with output of the greatest, well, some of the greatest technology, galactic standards wise, we could not handle a Dyson swarm. We actually had to resort to the use of tactical Nova weaponry, which is, it's like explosives, but I mean, the best example for you Elysians watching is it is like a nuke for the most part, except it runs on, well, I say ish. Technically, it is a area contained reaction that is similar in energy output to the output of a star going supernova, hence nova bomb. Anyway, normally a nova bomb, a non-tactical nova bomb, is used to eliminate a star system. You fire it at the core of a star system, and generally it is enough output to disrupt the host star, and with a uncontained range, spreads out, usually destroying, I say destroying, but eliminating the life on any worlds in that star system. Usually doubled up by the fact that it disrupts the star of the system, in addition to the output of a nova hitting that star and radiating outwards. And, it's like being, I mean, if you're on a planet in a system hit with a non-tactical nova bomb, it's like your star just went nova, it's not ideal. So basically, it, I mean, tactical variants are smaller. They have a contained range, basically. Anyway, we had to use those to hold off the enemy fleet and all. Anyway, back on topic. Here's what I was looking for. For you Elysians out there, that is, I believe, a bit difficult to say given the imperial decrees and all that, but Elysians, also known as people from Earth and the like. Basically, your tech level is classified as, not classified as an unknowable. Its status is tech level 10. technically slightly above tech level 10 if you want to be technical. In your Elysian terms, I suppose we'll go over the entire chart. Tech level 0's no tech, basically. Tech level 1's prehistory, also known to you Elysians as prehistory or the Stone Age. Tech level 2 is the early city-states era, about 5,000 of your Elysian BC to 500 BC. Then Iron Age is tech level 3. Middle Ages are tech level 4. Renaissance is tech level 5. The Age of Reason is tech level 6. The Victorian era is tech level 7. Your World Wars era is tech level 8. Tech level 9 is your Cold War era. And tech level 10 is loosely the years of, it's stated as the years of that you would call 1992 to 2020, loosely. Technically, tech level 11 is not where you are, despite tech level 10 stating it ends at 2020. Technically, it's not over. You're not past tech level 10. Tech level 11 is roughly 10 years of advancement. Or, in simple terms, tech level 11 is early laser weapons and prototypes of other energy weapons, holograms to a greater degree. I mean, y'all sort of have holograms, but to a far greater degree. Early data pads, which are like computers but run on neural network architecture. Rough AI, which I mean, you Elysians might say you have AI, but you don't really. You're getting there, but you don't really have what we consider rough AI. Not yet, at least. Early cybernetic prosthetics. You're getting there. Very early biotech. You're also getting there. Very early space colonies. Prototype mechs and early robots. Early robots. So that's tech level 11. You're not quite there, but you're near tech level. You're still in 10 technically. As for tech level 12, I'm talking non-early, standard now, laser weapons. Very early, non-standard energy technologies, standard data pads, standard AI, cybernetic prosthetics, early biotech, early space colonies, robots, early VR. And when we say VR, we don't mean your Elysian, ooh, virtual reality. No. When we say VR, we specifically, how do I put it? We mean literally beaming data. I say beaming, it's not really beaming, but you know, a network interface between your brain and a computer, so you are actually connected to a computer via thought, not outside, I'm looking through goggles VR, actual connected via into your brain, that kind. And very early energy shields, early nuclear fusion, that's tech level 12. Tech level 13 is early energy weapons, better than lasers, and, you know, like slightly, basically above laser grade energy weapons. Generation 2 AI. Generation 2 AI being super AI, basically. Getting there, at least. Getting to super tier AI, as opposed to just sentient AIs. Biotech fully achieved for the most part. Advanced computing. In-system colonization, being able to fully colonize your own star system. technologically wise, and long-term terraforming. Full-on mind upload virtual reality, early mechs, early energy shields, full-on nuclear fusion. When we say nuclear fusion, we do mean slightly different than your nuclear fusion. Here in the galaxy, we have slightly more efficient nuclear fusion. And full-on holograms, tech level 14, energy weapon tech is achieved, usually non-FTL starships. When we say non-FTL starships, we specifically have a classification that is starships that are of the grade of the galaxy to a degree. These are earlier variants, but when we say that, we mean it's hard to explain. We mean starships that aren't made out of the lightest materials, like past making starships that are simply rockets, a little bit better than spin gravity, hardy starships, if you will. Non-FTL, but hardy starships. Then full-on mechs, energy shields, and full-on nanotech at tech level 14. Tech level 15 is non-FTL starship refinement, so they're equal to galactic standard starships at tech level 15, but without FTL. Full space militaries, full-on space militaries, and artificial gravity. That's tech level 15. When I say artificial gravity, I mean non-spin, non-fake artificial gravity, full-on physics-style artificial gravity. Well, breaking your known Elysian physics, but not, spinning a tube to get artificial gravity. Although, to be fair, even most standard galactic civilizations will go for the cheaper alternative of spin gravity for things such as stations and Dyson swarms and the like. And then there's tech level 16. Not much. FTL is achieved. Multiple system colonies, star system colonies, multiple of those, FTL achieved. Tech level, that's the basic galactic standard you see around, is tech level 16. Tech level 17 is rapid terraforming. It's basically the primary tech of 17 is rapid terraforming, which is finally being able to terraform worlds in timescales that aren't millions of years or thousands of years and so forth. Rapid terraforming. Terraforming in dozens of years rather than thousands to millions. Tech level 18 is tech level 18 is the top achieved by most standard civilizations. Technically, a nation can push their tech level 2 tiers. Of course, they can increase their tech levels, but I mean, if you are tech level, let's say you're tech level 12, you could theoretically, at great expense, do a project to make something at tech level 14 if you're tech level 12. Tech level 18 is the normal galactic standard highest of most nations, and that's achieving very early teleportation. That's basically it. Achieving very early teleportation and far more efficient FTL and Starship engines. 19 is early teleportation. Tech level 20 is full-on teleportation, very early mega construction, and early matter manipulation. Tech level 21 is early mega construction and full-on matter manipulation. Tech level 22 is full-on mega construction and early mega tech. Tech level 23 is megatech and full mega construction and dimensional technologies. Tech level 24, space-time manipulation and early galactic control. Tech level 25 is full-on galactic control, and tech level 26 is just everything. It is, you have full understanding of physics for the most part. And that's basically the tech tree. Of course, you don't just get a tech level and understand everything in it. Those are like breakthrough things. Of course, you can have parts of higher techs and parts of lower and so forth and all that, but it's just a rough classification of what the output of what a nation can do. But basically, that's what I mean when I say the Empire is the most advanced. We technically, in our core realm, have tech level 26, but most Imperial forces that you see around the galaxy can produce tech level 20 to tech level 22 things. Of course, some of our technologies push that. We, of course, have specific templates and production capabilities to produce things such as dimensional drives for our starships. Which, if you recall, tech level 23 is what you would require for dimensional technologies. However, we can do that because, well, technically it's just a standard thing that the Empire has, and it's standard template to our production capabilities, basically. So I suppose in simple terms, that's the tech levels, roughly. In a very rough sense. But even being, as stated that, well, the frontier being tech level 16, the core system, they could stand up to a fleet of tech level 22 ships from three star systems output of tech level 22 ships because they have a Dyson swarm. And thus is the power of a Dyson swarm. Then again, it's not like a Dyson swarm is necessarily unbeatable. It's just not something you want to invade, if you will. And by that I mean, as explained by Nova weaponry, there's not much they could do if we used Nova weaponry. But the entire point, also same as if you have a large enough fleet and you throw weapons fire at them, eventually you would destroy a Dyson swarm. But you would also have to deal with whatever they have output. It's not like it would be easy. And it's not like you could do it with a ship. You would need entire output of a lot to do it. But in simple terms, I mean, the point I'm trying to make, I suppose, is basically it's invading a Dyson swarm is different than destroying one. And invading one is unpleasantly difficult. I mean, if you are invading a Dyson swarm and plan to succeed, you are losing. I mean, not even just, and by that, I mean, not even just destroying. Destroying's different. If you're invading one and you want to succeed, you will be losing the output, both monetarily and resource-wise. The output of several, I say several, but it's probably countless normal star systems, non-Dyson swarmed star systems. You are losing that much output in the costs of invading a Dyson swarm. Because you basically need a Dyson swarm to invade a Dyson swarm in any reasonable fashion, if that Dyson swarm is unified. all this implies that your Dyson swarm is unified. Specifically, if your Dyson swarm is not unified, of course, if you have treaties or they don't care, you could invade several stations and just call it there, theoretically. So it's not like it's a solidified thing. But the problem, I suppose, well, one of the questions is that you might have, why not build Dyson swarms? Why not build Dyson swarms? Forgive my strange intonation on words and so forth on occasion. I will remind you all, everything I say is, of course, being translated from the language of Galactic Standard to Elysian, and or your home language if you are not from Elysia and watching our broadcast. Otherwise, it is being translated into whatever language you speak. So, let's see. Basically, if the question you have is, why not just build Dyson swarms because they're ideal and their output is so great and all that? Most nations, at least in civilized space, have at least one Dyson swarm. At least one. Most civilized nations, if not all of the ones in the territory we call civilized space, have at least one Dyson swarm, usually more. The reason they don't just fill up with Dyson swarms, well, wrong map. Is because the greater your population, you might, well, first thing, you have to know what a Dyson swarm is. It is an incomprehensible amount of stations orbiting a star with an additionally incomprehensible amount of people. We're talking ridiculous numbers. Where is it? Here we are. Sorry, doing math here. Hundred, thousand, million. Now I just need to try and say this number without failing. Ah, here we are. That's not right. I messed up. My apologies. I think that's 10 billion billion. Let's try and read the number. Oh gosh. 100,000 million billion trillion quadrillion, and then another step to 10. Okay, we'll do this easier. Well, let me get rid of those to make this a lot easier because I was separating it into categories. Here we go. That is a 1 with 19 zeros or something like that for the population of a base Dyson sphere, not even a heavy Dyson Dyson swarm, sorry. Yeah, a 1 with 19 zeros for a base Dyson swarm of population. So basically, we're talking about just a massive amount of population. And the problem that nations face, and why they don't just keep building Dyson swarms, is a nation can only exert so much control over a group of people. You can't control everyone. Even with all that money and the amount of people that are loyal and all that, there comes a point in which opinions differ amongst people. And these people with differing opinions, there are many of them in a Dyson swarm. Given the amount of, look, you get 10 people, just 10 people in a room, they're not going to agree on everything. Now get 1 with 19 zeros, people. There are going to be so many different views, so many different groups, so many different teams, even just so many different people. And people will find any reason to dislike other groups of people or dislike the way things are done, etc., etc., etc. A Dyson swarm has so many people that you could have, for you Elysians out there, let me put it this way. I'm trying to find something obscure. Archaeology. You can have, in a Dyson swarm, we're talking populations so large, you could have several Earths worth of people just in the field of archaeology. Like, we're talking mind-bogglingly large amounts of people. And basically, getting in for a nation, a unified nation, to get any coherent structure and not have constant rebellions, which they do have. If you have a Dyson swarm, you have constant rebellions. There's no way around it. But having such large amounts of everything and so many different views and opinions and different everything, basically, you can't have too many of those. You just couldn't control that many people. The bureaucratic efficiency can only be so much. And with so many people disagreeing, so many people trying to subvert the system, etc., it's basically guaranteed that sub-nations will exist in your nation. And these sub-nations will want, well, statistically speaking, some of these sub-nations will have, a small sub-nation will have more population and resources than probably 10 of your Earth's worth of people, all unified under a single goal. Probably more than 10, all unified under a single goal. And their goal, statistically, this is a small fraction of a Dyson swarm, and their goal could be the destruction of the main nation. Now, this doesn't necessarily pose a threat, but there are multiple of these within. And just math-wise, the numbers are so large that at some point you lose efficiency. And it's just not viable to have more and more Dyson swarms. At least not here. And the same technically applies to species you wouldn't expect. For instance, the insectoid nations also have problems with this, but it has to do with the control of insectoid leadership and the hive mind, and which hive mind leader is in control and so forth. And for robots, it somewhat works the same, and so on and so forth, except robots have more efficiency in it, as do insectoids, than Terrans and more independently styled sentient beings. Those types of sentient beings have a bit more control over their populace and thus have a bit more control over how many large things they can have before the decay sets in. But there is a point in which efficiency is lost, and you either need to basically accept that you're going to have sub-nations or not build more, and those sub-nations can cause trouble because they can have their own goals and so forth, and there just basically comes a point in which it's not ideal to have more Dyson swarms. It is theoretically ideal, but the way we have it here, there comes a point in which a over nation cannot control that many sub-nations, which has a way around it, such as in our government system, specifically for running nations and the like, we have rules for vassal nations. However, vassal nations are independent and act under their own means and only pay you 1/10 to 1/20th of their output, and they have their own goals and so forth, and that can lead to trouble. For instance, with the Council, the Galactic Council specifically, not the meeting group, but the nation. There's two separate things there. I think we've covered that before too, but they are both a government entity and a nation. The nation aspect of them, they're made up of a bunch of sub-nations, and basically what happened with the Council, they had so much territory and so many sub-nations with independence that basically they became an overly, what's the word I'm looking for? Inefficient. An overly inefficient and basically gridlocked bureaucracy. They basically could not get anything done. Well, they could get things done, obviously, but basically any major things they wanted to get done, they had a real hard time getting done because of getting, for them it was 2,000 or so separate nations to agree on anything. Not all of them had to agree, but enough of them to agree on anything, to get anything done or anything passed. It just did not work out for them very well. And that is on a smaller scale. We say 2,000 nations, obviously, given that there's multiple Dyson swarms, there's more people in total because there are Dyson swarms in the council. But basically, if you can't get 2,000 separate nations to necessarily agree on something, I mean, you Elysians can't get 200 or so nations to agree on anything. Pretty sure you Elysians can't even get one nation to agree on anything within itself. So, you know, having a Dyson swarm worth of people, you're with different goals and so forth, and every single small view has a population greater than your Earth. We're talking just so many separate things that it's just not efficient at a certain point. Which is why governments generally limit the amount of Dyson swarms they will produce. Other than that, I mean, it doesn't mean they don't produce them. They just roughly limit the amount of expansion that they do as to keep their nation coherent. But, I mean, of course, there are all sorts of caveats and exceptions and all that. I mean, the entire war between the systems authority and the council is because of that little problem there. So, back in the day, let's go back to that other map, I suppose. The systems authority is an alliance. Technically, the systems authority started as a faction known as the Council Militarist Party. They were a political party within the council that consisted of the Outer Worlds. By Outer Worlds, I mean the border colonies, the ones out here bordering all the other nations. Not really the southern border ones, because there was no problem there. I mean, there was a problem there. They got some support from there, but mostly not the southern border. Mostly this border. Reason being, basically, there's not a lot of Dyson swarms out here on the border. The Council core worlds have Dyson swarms and lots of money and don't come under attack. Whenever there's a war or a conflict with other nations, they happen on the border regions. They suffer the attacks. And thus, the border regions are constantly having to rebuild and all that, and are basically where the wars in the council happen. They happen in the council territory in the border regions. And so the militarist party of the council basically said the core worlds of the council, with their Dyson swarms and all that, and their high standard of living and all their production output, basically they don't. It's true that they didn't, and what they do is not provide relief or aid or support to their border worlds. Because of it's half due to that whole gridlock and which of the 2,000 nations wants to be taxed to help the other ones. What, you're going to tax this section of border nations to help rebuild these ones when these ones are also rebuilding? These ones refuse under the council charter to be taxed to help these ones because it's part of their right for when they signed up for the council, etc., etc. And basically, no funding or support was ever going to helping the worlds that were damaged in the conflicts with other nations. These outer worlds formed up under several military leaders and thus formed the Council Militarist Party, urging for more military support and civilian support and structured funding for rebuilding the outer worlds of the Council. Unfortunately, they never received this funding. And due to that, thanks to the support of the populace, looking at the rich, unattacked, fully, basically, in the Council Dyson Swarm, they are basically post-scarcity. They're basically post-scarcity in the Council Dyson Swarm. Meaning they have everything they could possibly want, basically. Well, the Outer Worlds don't. They formed their council militaries. A lot of the council military was in these regions, given the constant wars. There were a bit of rebellions, a bit of seizing of military units and so forth, but eventually the populations of the Outer Worlds were unified, rose up, and went to strike against the core worlds. Eventually they made poor choices and signed on with several other nations, becoming not the Council Militarist Party, but the Systems Authority, that then waged war against the Council core worlds. Technically, back in the day, all of this was like, the Systems Authority used to literally just be in small pockets on the border until they unified that border and eventually pushed out forward and forward, and eventually were sieging the Central Worlds, eventually were pushed back, and now here's their line of control. But basically that's the history, the quick history, that's actually the quick variant, of the Council Systems Authority War, which sparked the Second Galactic War. Technically, it didn't. It arose because of the Second Galactic War. The Second Galactic War started when the Empire decided, well, a bunch of lords within the Empire started another strike on civilized space, started attacking civilized space. Civilized space unified. It went on for a while. Council border wars were attacked, not funded, and that's where we get into the whole thing with the other nations fell in their own alliances, so forth. There were a bunch of different nations and factions. One of the factions was completely destroyed. The council sort of dissolved. I believe one of the factions that existed disintegrated early on in the war. There was, of course, the Empire. There was the Council. There was the Systems Authority, which arose a little bit later. There was the ACN, that's what they were. The Allied Central Nations. The ACN was specifically a bunch, not all of them, but a bunch of the other non-council core nations. A lot of them disliked the council due to disagreements with a lot of certain things. But basically, there was that faction, and I believe there was also the United Forces Front or something like that. There was a third faction that basically was obliterated early on. But basically, there was that whole thing, and yeah. But that's basically the history of how that went. The council dissolved, and here we are. I say the council dissolved, but that's like, there is a bit of confusion in the statements. The Galactic Council is the name of the alliance of over 2,000 separate nations that form this territory that we call the Galactic Council. There is also the faction, that's the faction. There is also a, how do you put it? There's a unified platform in which all of the civilized space nations participate. I was trying to think of the word for that. But basically, it's sort of a place in which the nations of civilized space deal with things, talk with each other, come to arrangements, sort of like your United Nations for you Elysians. Sort of like that. A place in which all the nations go together and discuss things. Sort of like that. The confusing thing is that it shares the exact same name as the faction of the Galactic Council. It is the Galactic Council because it's a council of the galaxy, while the faction is also called the Galactic Council. And for greater confusion's sake, by the way, the meetings of the Galactic Council are hosted in the Galactic Council capital world. Yes. So the capital of the Galactic Council is where they host the meetings of the Galactic Council and the other meetings of the Galactic Council. They both have their meetings of their faction and the meetings of their greater galactic society on the same world, and both are called the Galactic Council. The world, of course, is, I believe, called Tavo. Is the name of the capital of the Galactic Council? I'd have to look it up. Look, it's my job as an Imperial to insult the Galactic Council, yes, both of them, at every single instance I get. The Empire has a long and proud tradition of being a member of the Galactic Council, not the faction, the meeting group of galactic civilizations. And while going there, absolutely insulting the entire establishment. The Empire, of course, recognizes no other nation in the galaxy as legitimate. And so we have a representative there that literally just goes there to cause trouble. Not, of course, big trouble or really disrupt things. Be slightly disruptive because we despise the rest of the galactic nations. To undermine their legitimacy, if you will. And they allow it to a degree. They don't have a choice. I'm sure if you see this map here, even if the Empire does go off the map over here, but even if we just count the amount of space on this map that the Empire has in this one section of the map, it is even larger than the Council. It's larger than the Council and all these other nations combined. It's larger than even if you include neutral territories and all that. It's not larger, I suppose, if you include Eldritch space and the Void and so forth. But it's bigger than everything else combined. Of course, the Empire's not unified. We are a bunch of lords that decide to fight amongst each other more than we have ever decided to fight against any other faction in the galaxy. Which is our second proud tradition, infighting between lords. But basically, they sort of came to that arrangement after the First Galactic War. The Galactic Council, as a faction, started existing shortly before the First Galactic War because they saw the Empire becoming a threat. The Galactic Council as a meeting sort of formed around that time unofficially, but after the end of the First Galactic War, it was kind of accepted on sort of peace terms that the Empire would have a place in the Galactic Council, not the faction, the organization. And so we have a sort of honorary place in there in which we just cause trouble. Once more, because the Empire does not deal with any other galactic power for the most part. We don't really deal with them. We don't trade with any other faction. We used to. Honestly, we used to. Those were dark times. Not really for the Empire. Well, we don't talk about those times. But the Empire, generally nowadays, and for the longest while, has had strict policies against trading with non-imperial nations. even when we did have the ability to trade with non-imperial nations, in the empire we have laws against the spreading of imperial technologies and certain advanced technologies that basically makes it not, we don't trade much with the galaxy, basically. And it's not like we require anything from any other nation, being so far advanced in our technologies. So for the most part, we have seen no problems with dealing with any other nation. I mean, generally, the Imperial mission is spy on every other nation, see if they're breaking any sort of Imperial law, because we impose our Imperial laws on the galaxy, not on citizenry, of course. I mean, there are rules we have that say that other nations should not have a certain amount of technology of certain classes and so forth. Not like an amount, but like a certain tier, certain technologies. And so we'll spy, see what they're doing, and disrupt their operations. Other than that, of course, on occasion, imperial lords will wage personal wars against other nations. But your standard imperial lord does not have a lot of territory. So an imperial lord waging a war against civilized territories is usually small scale. It only becomes a concern for the major nations if a greater lord or a royal or multiple lords work together to attack them. That's when things are bad for them, and when a lot of those do it, that's what they classify as a galactic war. Well, they also classify a galactic war when multiple nations that aren't the empire fight each other in alliances, so forth. Basically, when a majority of nations are involved in a war, we call it a galactic war. It's usually rare, usually conflicts are small, and we're currently in the second galactic war, which happened because of the, major alliances of the majority of civilized space. But I believe that covers the basics of that. Hmm. But yeah, that's basically that. And on a world building aspect, if you're wondering, we're about to use our multidimensional device here to touch upon the fourth wall. Crazy. So, if you're wondering, for instance, why don't you just name the Galactic Council and the Galactic Council two separate things? Because, lore-wise, the Galactic Council formed roughly around the same time they sort of formed, loosely. And the Galactic Council started in the Galactic Council. Now, yes, they have the same name, and it's been like that in the lore now for years and years and years and years. So it's not just something we can change, but also in life. Sometimes things aren't optimal. You must understand that when writing or world building, things are not always optimal. Now, that's not an excuse per se for people, characters, nations, etc., to make poor choices. It's not an excuse for them to make poor choices they shouldn't or wouldn't make. But people and factions and nations don't act perfectly. They don't. People make mistakes. They do what they believe is right, and they try, but people make mistakes. And factions make mistakes, and nations make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. As such, also, things are not always clear in general. For instance, let me think of an example for you, Elysians. I'm sure you can probably think of more than I can. I'm not super well versed in Elysian culture and history. But for instance, trying to think of a good one. Elysian history, Elysian history. Ah, that'll do. That'll do. No. Trying to think of a good example. Let's quickly try and find one. Let's hope that things don't crash. Because they're sure trying to. Hmm. I can't think of any, unfortunately. But I know they are around. Basically, we'll just go with a rough example because I can't be bothered to look things up. Not when things lag this badly. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, in your Elysia, you have many cities and towns. And many of those cities and towns share the exact same name of other cities and towns. Let's try one more time to find one. Nope, my network connection does not wish to, I suppose that's a example, I suppose. Nope. Sorry, like I said, my connection is deciding it wants to not work. My apologies. For some reason, my connection to the data net has decided it literally wants to just, like, forever load. So, but yes, many small towns cities and so forth that share names with other small towns and cities. There are also, okay, here's a good example. A Corvette. The car or the ship? Which is it? They both share a name. Corvette, car, ship. Sorry, I just can't think of very many examples right now. My apologies. But there are plenty of them, of things that share names that are different, and it can, theoretically, cause confusion. Same thing here. The Galactic Council is both a faction and a... see, I don't know the word for it. Meeting group? Galactic... I don't know the word for it. It's a meeting. It's basically a place in which they go and do the stuff. Organization. It's an organization, I suppose. And so they share names. They just happen to, but, you know. Basically, things don't always need to turn out neatly, is the entire point of that botched tirade. That entire tangent about names being the same. But basically, yeah. Well, unfortunately, our conscripts have failed. It appears that our cooling systems have failed again. At least they worked partially. My apologies. I will, of course, be calling it short because the temperature in here is rising rapidly. And as I've stated before, unfortunately, the device we use to broadcast interferes with our technologies. Given the fact that it's some sort of advanced multidimensional device, it interferes with our technologies. So my advanced augments and my cooling systems, even if I put on my armor, would not help here. So we will call it here. I will, of course, go so I can actually, you know, not be in such terrible temperatures. And in addition, next time is our solo tabletop RPG on Friday. And if we have time on Sunday, we will play a video game. Probably Endless Sky or something. Assuming that our heating system, or cooling system, if you will, works. Thank you all for stopping by. My apologies we didn't get much done. Rather than rambling and talking about lore. But that's just sometimes how it goes. We will continue to try to focus on world building in our world building series, and I will try to figure out which world building area we will do. Thank you all for stopping by, and see you next time.